Welcome back, everyone. This is Roseanne Faust. I'm the president and CEO of SAMCETA. It's great to see over 100 people on Zoom. That was very exciting, and I want to thank Mary Nicely, the Senior Policy Advisor, and the Honorable Tony Thurman for kind of setting up our panel going forward. And the panel that we are focused on this afternoon is, can we solve the digital divide? And we have a tremendous lineup here on our panel. We have LORENA Hernandez, the Director of Community Impact for Comcast California. We have LLOYD, a former Assembly member and President of Filament Strategies and Senior Fellow at the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. We have the Honorable Assemblymember Luz Rivas. Great to have you as the chair of the Select Committee on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math from our 39th Assembly District. And we have our very own Jon Walton, Chief Information Officer for the County of San Mateo, as well as a trustee in one of my favorite communities, Pacific Grove, for the Unified School District. So each of the panelists, if they could share with us, and I also have Mark Berman, Assemblymember Mark Berman, who is truly a leader for San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And Mark is co-chairing this panel with me, and we're going to go through having each of the panelists introduce themselves, talk about ways to address the digital divide, and then we're going to go back and forth with Q&A. Mark, it's so great to see you, and I love what you did for our community through COVID and what you're continuing to do. So great to see you.
Have been doing to help, our business communities in San Mateo County during these really tough times. The work that you're doing is amazing. So I think we're going to get started. And first up, I'd love to hear from LORENA Hernandez from Comcast about some of the work that Comcast has been doing. I actually used to work with Comcast on these issues when I worked at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, and know that Comcast has been a leader in supporting our communities for so long. So LORENA, tell us a little more about it.
Thanks, Assemblymember Berman, and everyone involved with bringing us together for this important conversation about digital equity in our community. It's that I'm extremely passionate and committed about because as a first generation Latina from humble beginnings, I know the importance of having access to basic tools and resources and opportunities are necessary to succeed in school and in life. Since I was old enough, I've been advocating on behalf of children and families from my community and other communities also, and that has continued until today. For more than a decade as the community impact leader at Comcast, I've been working to close the digital divide through our Internet Essentials program. As we know, connectivity at home is critical not only during these times. Internet at home is vital for education, healthcare, social services, and so much more. And since 2011, we've connected more than 8 million low-income individuals to Comcast's Internet Essentials program, 90% of whom were not connected to the internet at home until they signed up through Internet Essentials. This includes more than 1 million residents across our California footprint, which is in Northern California. And this is the #1 state in overall participation throughout our country. Internet Essentials has a integrated wraparound design that addresses each of the major barriers to broadband adoption that research has identified. And those are the lack of digital literacy skills, which the superintendent spoke to, the lack of awareness of the relevancy of internet to everyday life needs, and the fear of the internet, the lack of a computer, and also the cost of internet service. Therefore, when we created this program, we made sure that we were addressing these issues and barriers. And we provide low-cost internet for $9.95 per month. We've provided more than 100,000 subsidized computers. We've invested more than $650 million in digital literacy training. Those are grants to local community-based organizations that are able to provide digital literacy training in language, in community, and in culture. And as we've learned through the challenges through this program is that connectivity in a computer alone is not sufficient. People really need to know how to use a computer, how to navigate the technology, the internet, and so much more. And so it's been a vital part of the bridging the digital divide. The pandemic has brought to light other issues to lack of connectivity. There's a lot of families who don't want to connect because of fear of immigration. There's also seniors who don't want to have access because they don't want to learn a new skill or just the fear of internet safety. But we're working with different partners to really solve these issues. In fact, we just recently partnered with Parent Institute for Quality Education, PICA, which is a statewide organization. And one of the things that we learned from the pandemic when it happened was that you need to have multiple touch points to reach families, especially the families that we're trying to connect, and to educate them and inform them and distill any myths and any fears that they may have. And so we're providing a grant to them to do this work, to make sure that they're helping the families, learn how to turn on a computer, learn how to just do the basics that you need on a computer. And this is one-on-one support that they're providing to these families. The one thing, and overall, like what we've learned is that we can't do this alone. It does take a village. We've been working and doing this for over a decade, and we've known that, in order for this program to be successful, we had to structure it as a partnership between Comcast and tens of thousands of school districts, libraries, elected officials, nonprofit community partners, and media partners. Our collaborative efforts have made Internet Essentials the most successful broadband adoption program in the nation. And we have a long-standing, time-tested, proven program. As COVID-19 shelter-in-place was announced in March, Comcast was the first to offer 2 months free to connect all eligible low-income individuals, as well as we opened up all our public Wi-Fi hotspots to everyone, whether you were a Comcast customer or not. And we're doing so much more to support our customers and our communities during this time. We also started a partnership program where we established partnerships with third parties, whether it be a school district, a city, a nonprofit organization, where they could also sponsor internet connectivity for their, students, clients. And I'm happy to announce that we have a great partnership with Ravenswood School District, San Mateo Union High School, as well as, thanks to Jon Walton, with San Mateo County also. And I'll let Jon share a little bit more about that partnership. But we have seen, in partnership, the tremendous impact Internet Essentials has made in the lives of families and individuals, and really changing, their lives. And we invite everyone who's joined us today to learn more about Internet Essentials by visiting our website at internetessentials.com. I also invite you to help us spread the word about the program and that this is available, because together, it's working together and collaborating together that we're really going to be able to make a difference and connect more Californians, to the internet. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Lorena. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Roseanne now.
So thank you, and thank you, Lorena. Lloyd, we're going to turn to you. You spent many years tackling the digital divide as an Assembly member on the board of California Emerging Technology Fund and in academia. What's different this time? Will we see the necessary policy changes to really force a change? We'd love your thoughts on that, kind of wrapped into this whole discussion.
Sure, thank you. And it's my pleasure to be back at Connect20. I've always enjoyed participating in these conferences over the years. It's just so vital. So before I directly answer your question, let me just briefly state the digital divide is actually two things. We wrap it up in one title and one number, but the digital divide is a rural divide and an urban divide. And over the last decade plus, most of the attention has been focused on and money has been focused on the rural divide. But in actual fact, the urban divide is much, much greater. In California, you're looking at, according to the data, somewhere along the lines of 2 to 2.5 million urban households that are disconnected, and somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 rural households that are disconnected. Now, I don't mean to diminish either aspect of the digital divide. It just seems that the urban divide often gets forgotten, maybe less so now, which is going to be my segue into what is different. Well, I'm really, I've been, asked that question multiple times over the last, 6 months or so. And what I'm really hopeful, if there is one silver lining to this entire pandemic that we have suffered through, it's that all of a sudden, everybody is aware of the digital divide and the consequences of that digital divide. One thing it has actually shown us, though, is there's an additional aspect to the urban divide, and that's not just disconnected, but underconnected. According to most of the data we have looked at, the question was simply, are you connected, yes or no? How do you connect? Now you've got 3 kids, 2 kids, a husband, wife, whatever it is, and they all need that same bandwidth, and they all need devices. So in the past, where one computer wasn't enough, or might have been enough, now it might not be. So what is different is, my kids go to Sac City Unified School District. We distributed, I believe, 25,000 computing devices prior to starting up our distance learning. And that is just the number that I happen to know. The same story is told around the state. So we're proving, one, you can send computers home with kids. They're not going to steal them. They're not going to break them. They're not going to abuse them. They're going to treat them with respect. 2, of that 2.5 million households in California, urban households in California, you've removed one of the biggest impediments that Lorena identified, is lack of a device. I guess I will conclude by saying, for me, in my research, when I refer to the digital divide, it's 3 things. I refer to it as a 3-part test. A broadband connection without a device is useless. You need a broadband connection that meets the government's minimum speeds. You need a device capable of handling the tasks at hand, and this is not acceptable. If you're a high school student trying to apply to college, if you're somebody applying for a job, this is a supplementary device. You're not going to be able to type a resume or a term paper or a job application on this. So you need some sort of device with a keyboard that allows you meaningful engagement, and you need, as Lorena said, the digital literacy skills to use those things. So what is different is simply the attention and the number of school districts across the state that are providing both connectivity and devices. So I'm hopeful that once this ends and we go back to normal, hopefully next year, that we retain the connectivity, because it's essential. Even if there isn't a pandemic, that connectivity is essential to life in the 21st century for everybody.
Thank you, Lloyd. I'm going to turn it back to Mark.
And I just want to say thanks, Lloyd. I don't think we've had a chance to meet, but you're somebody who I've known about and read about for a long time. So really appreciate you joining us today. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and hopefully look forward to future chats with you about these really important issues. It's now my pleasure to introduce my Assembly colleague, Luz Rivas. And I'll say I was bummed when Luz got elected, because I'd been working on a lot of these issues, computer science education and other things, and Luz is so much more perfect to lead those efforts. And so I knew that we were getting somebody in the Assembly who was going to take a leadership role, given her background on STEM education, on the digital divide. I've been fortunate to work with Luz on a couple of those issues already, and look forward to working together a lot more. Luz, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and of course to Assemblymember Kevin Mullen. This is such a great conference that you hold every year, and I'm happy to participate this year. And I actually was happy to learn when I joined the Assembly that you had been working on these issues. It was someone that I could talk to right away about tech and computer science education, and it was very exciting.
Thanks so much. Looking forward to working with you for many more years to come. So tell us a little bit about what you've been working on.
Sure. So I entered the Assembly in 2018. Before that, I was the founder of a nonprofit, like a STEM education nonprofit called DIY Girls. So it served young girls in my district. It's still a nonprofit that exists, but I'm not involved anymore. But my background is engineering. So I'm an electrical engineer. Then I became a nonprofit founder, and now I'm in public service in the state assembly. So of course, when I first entered, I wanted to work on computer science education, and that's some of the work I've been doing in the assembly. I'm the chair of the select committee on STEM. So I had a hearing last year, or earlier this year, actually, on where we are in access to computer science in all public schools. And that is something I'm very passionate about. Besides access to the actual devices and tech, I think about the next divide, which is the content, and are low-income students being encouraged to be creators of technology and not just the users of the devices. And so that's my background, but I know now that I'm in the state legislature that just broadband access, especially in urban areas. I'm glad that Lloyd mentioned that, because I'm from Los Angeles and we have a significant divide there, in urban areas where lots of families do not have access or can't afford the higher speeds so that everyone in their household can use the internet, especially now during COVID.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a huge problem. Like you said, in LA, I've got it in my district in suburban communities that have this huge digital divide, like Lloyd alluded to. Let me just ask you real quick, Luz, before we move on to John. But when you were at DIY, at Do It Yourself, did you see this connectivity issue and this digital divide, and how did that impact the young kids that were taking your programs?
Sure. So DIY Girls, we ran after school programs for 5th grade and above, and what I found is a lot of the girls in the program, when I would ask them about access at home, would say, well, they would use one of their parents' cell phone, to help with their homework and, of course, to get on social media and everything else that kids want to do or explore. They didn't have a laptop or even a desktop at home. A lot of them didn't have internet access because a lot of people in my district live in households where there's multiple families. So maybe the owner of the home doesn't allow them access, or they live in the back, like in a garage or in an ADU where they don't have access. So what I had found was a lot of the families use public places like libraries and other places to access the internet. So like every weekend, a family takes their kid to the public library so that she could do her research or her homework. But it was just a once a week access, which isn't enough, right? Especially right now. And that's why LA Unified has had to hand out hotspots to a lot of children and families.
Yeah, I mean, as those libraries are closed and those internet connectivity points aren't open to the public right now. Absolutely. Well, Luz, we're going to come back to that. I'm going to turn it back over to Roseanne to introduce John.
Thank you, and thank you, Assemblymember Rivas. John, you have a very unique perspective. You're the Chief Information Officer for San Mateo County. You have numerous roles in the public sector. You're also a school board member, Pacific Grove Unified. So can you tell us how your various interactions on the professional and personal level have shaped your approach and what each sector can learn from each other?
Thanks, Roseanne, and thanks for having me. It's great to be on this panel, and hearing the other panelists' views, I think align a lot with the things I've seen in my career. I started with implementing public Wi-Fi a long time ago when Susan Hammer was the mayor in San Jose, and was working for the mayor down there, and then moved to San Francisco and worked for Gavin Newsom and Ed Lee in implementing Wi-Fi there. And now here in San Mateo County, I've been fortunate enough to have a great board, supervisors, and really have enjoyed, expanding Wi-Fi here before COVID even. We really see Wi-Fi as a utility, as some people have mentioned, and is really a necessity to have equal opportunity. You know, government and businesses keep putting more and more things online, and without access to the internet, without the training, without the tools, you know, it puts families and students and businesses at a disadvantage if they don't have access to those. So here in San Mateo County, before COVID, in the past 5 years, you know, we've stood up over 100 public Wi-Fi sites around the county. There's over 1 million user hours per month on the public Wi-Fi system now, which I think is just an indication of the demand and the need from the public to have free and you know, unlimited bandwidth and access to information. When COVID happened, it was shortly after I got elected as a school board member. So you're right. I got to see it from two aspects. One in the county, where it was obvious right away that the families and the students of those families were at a horrible disadvantage, not being able to do the distance learning and have access to the information that some of the other students and families did. And in the school district, I'm fortunate, I guess you could say, in the sense that you know, it's a very small school district, not very large there in Pacific Grove, but we still had a significant number of families to some of the points where you had multiple children per family and the parents were at home. And so the idea that just a single hotspot would be sufficient to meet the needs of a family or the students in a single household, it was obvious quickly that that wasn't going to be the only solution. Obviously, we had to do that as a school district, and I know a lot of other school districts did that as well to meet the immediate need. But I think as the pandemic has gone on and we've realized that this, in some extent, is the new normal, and how we address distance learning and social distancing, and unfortunately shelter in place at times. And I appreciate, you know, all the concerns, and I share a lot of them about socialization and, you know, screen time issues. But the situation we're in now is, you know, it's just a critical necessity that we provide connectivity. So the Board of Supervisors here in San Mateo County wisely set aside millions of dollars for an initial set of pilot projects to be done in partnership with the school districts. You know, we knew they were challenged and didn't have the resources or knowledge to solve all those problems on their own. So we were happy to step in and work with them. They shared their student location data that were having the problems. My team and our partners at Ruckus and at Kaizen Technologies, we came up with several different ways, some with Comcast, some with AT&T, some with T-Mobile. We had mobile units that we could move around to neighborhoods. And then we expanded the network we've been building over the years to really reach into those neighborhoods from hub sites. You know, we have over 200 facilities around the county that we can use as hub sites and expand out from there into the neighborhoods with mesh networks. And so that's what we're doing now. We did some initial ones in the South County around East Palo Alto, and La Honda and Pescadero, which was fortuitous because of the fires. And we really needed better coverage out there, both from a disaster and a distance learning standpoint. And now we're focused our efforts between now and the end of the year in the North County around Daly City and Foster City and South San Francisco, and take the learnings we did from those initial areas and really expand them there. I think, you know, for me, the takeaway is, you know, the students are really kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will, for society as a whole. We have great heat maps now where students are having these challenges for the whole county. But really, you know, that's just an indicator of the community as a whole where it struggles and doesn't have the access that it needs. So I'm hopeful that when the pandemic's over and we do go back to hopefully a more normal pace and situation in our lives and business, that, you know, this momentum is sustained where these walls between educational institutions and cities and counties and the state are broken down and we can work together. I really think this is something we need to do statewide. And I'm hopeful, you know, some of these success stories from the Bay Area and from LA and other places where I've heard that we've solved these problems, we can take those and really come up with a collaborative way to do this across the whole state and be a leader in the nation for it.
Jon, I want to thank you for all the work you've done, because you use the term canary in a coal mine, talking about students. And the work you've done has also benefited our small business, our minority-owned businesses, our underserved community. I mean, everything that you have done, our downtowns, our seniors that don't have the kind of access that we hope. So it really has spread out. And what I'd like to do is propose a question to the panel and start with our Assemblywoman. And the question is, do you foresee a time, and then Assemblywoman Rivas, if you would answer, and then we'd have our other three panelists chime in. Do you foresee a time when broadband access is approached like a landline phone service or gas electric utility that are required to provide a universal lifeline service? Do you see that happening?
I definitely think that that's where we're headed, right? Because especially during this pandemic, we realize how much access to broadband internet is a necessity for all, right? For kids to continue going to school, for people to be able to work remotely. And so I think definitely that's where we're headed. You know, I have colleagues in both the Assembly and the State Senate that, you know, have proposed bills last year, and I think they will continue them this next legislative session to, you know, to increase broadband access all over California, both rural and urban areas of the state. And I think, you know, while like maybe 20 years ago, this was considered a luxury, or, you know, maybe like having cable TV and like just access to hundreds of channels. You know, when I was a kid, you only had the three major networks, and then, you know, getting cable was just a luxury. I feel like years ago, maybe access to the internet felt that way. But now we all use it and need it to study, to work, to have access to information in our communities. And I, you know, so I really do believe it will become a necessary utility.
Lorena, Lloyd, would you like to comment?
Well, I would agree. And more to that point, under the last year of President Obama, the FCC went down that path to start making broadband a Title II common carrier, giving them the authority to regulate it as a utility. Obviously, President Trump rolled that back. Let's see what happens when President Biden takes office, you know, what path he goes down. For me, you know, I don't believe in regulation for the sake of regulation. What I'm really concerned is the disconnected. You know, my broadband, at least right now, doesn't need to be regulated. At least if you're able to afford it, it's a competitive marketplace. But what I've described it as, you know, back when I did a piece of legislation, some of you might remember, called DIVCA, the Digital Infrastructure Video Competition Act for cable here in California, I would give speeches on that. And my prediction at the time, and I'm still holding to that, is at some point we're going to separate the service from the infrastructure, and we'll regulate the infrastructure and let the services compete, because over the internet, service is really easy to provide. All of the websites, anybody, you know, can innovate. You know, Google tried to overbuild, and if Google couldn't go in and make their Google Fiber successful with their resources, it's really a challenge. And when you look around California, you really have what I would describe as an oligopoly. Some areas have 3 competitors. I actually happen to have 3 competitors, but my daughter's teacher lives about 45 minutes from here, and there's only 1 provider in his area. So, you know, most places have 2, some have 1, and if you have no providers. So, you know, I'm concerned about the people who have no access or who can't afford the access. You know, when I think I might have neglected to mention that in the urban areas, the lack of access is directly tied to household income. And once you go down below about $30,000 per year in household income, broadband access drops off the edge of the cliff. So for those people, I'm concerned about how we provide it. You know, is it a regulated entity? Do we work with the providers to divvy up the pool of customers to ensure that they have a provider without providing a burden disproportionately to one provider? But I think ultimately, for the reasons that Assemblymember Rivas said, you know, we have to ensure access. You cannot survive economically in California, educationally in California in 2021 without a broadband connection.
Lorena and John, would you like to weigh in? And then I'm going to turn it back to Mark.
Well, I would just like to, I guess, chime in a little bit in the sense I think you're right, you know, and I appreciate what the service providers do, but the service providers, you know, they're beholden to the shareholders and to make money really for their shareholders as a private entity. And I appreciate that. And I understand that. So I really believe the role of government is to step in and fill those gaps. You know, there's always going to be a portion of our population that, for whatever reason, cannot afford or does not have physical access to the infrastructure that someone who lives in a wealthy neighborhood with unlimited or fairly high income has. And so I really think just like public roads and water fountains and parks, I really think the internet has really become that basic. You know, we've pushed so much of what people need to thrive in our society and be successful onto the internet with the expectation that the internet is equally accessible in an unlimited fashion by everyone, that it really has to be the role of government at some point to step in and create a level playing field for everyone to have that access. And perhaps, you know, the access I provide in some of my rural areas, and our county has a very rural side and a very urban side, if you're familiar with our county. Certainly it's not at the quality of, you know, fiber connectivity, but we've done a lot of studies that have shown that we are providing sufficient bandwidth to a community that had no service, where they can do distance learning, they can make, you know, Wi-Fi calling, they can stay connected, they can have the access they need, albeit in a more limited form than someone in an urban area with a higher income. But I think that's our role, and I think that's our challenge statewide.
Thank you, John. Lorena, would you like to comment as a provider?
Yeah, I would just caution, as Lloyd said, I think it's important for us, you know, and I mentioned it in my comments, that we need to partner together on this. And, you know, as we've learned, you know, regulation does not foster innovation. You know, it also limits competition. I think there's ways in which we can partner together and you know, address this, because we do know that access is important. And so we look forward to those conversations with those of you here and also others that are, you know, looking to partner with us on this.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Berman.
Great. Thanks, Roseanne. And Lorena, if I can keep it with you for a second, you know, Lloyd mentioned that precipitous drop-off went for households that make $30,000 or less in terms of access to broadband, which is exactly what Internet Essentials is meant to kind of help. And Comcast has been a leader in this space for a long time. What have you been able to, or have you been able to influence other providers to kind of move in the same direction that Comcast has in trying to close this digital divide?
Thank you for the question. And you know, as I mentioned, we started this program back in 2011, and since then, you know, we were the first ones, you know, out the gate, and have had other providers provide, you know, their versions of low-income programs, you know, throughout our state, you know, and you know, I think it was important for us to ensure that we address the needs and the barriers that were identified by researchers and those working in this space, you know, to really develop a comprehensive program to address the various, you know, issues. And COVID has brought up additional issues, as I outlined. There are other factors that come into play as to why families are not connecting. And I talked about the Internet Essentials Partner Program. And just as an example, these school districts or cities or third parties are sponsoring, in some cases, up to a year of free internet, and families are still not signing up. And like I said, you know, fear of immigration, there's fear of privacy issues, not understanding the relevancy of it. So it's much broader than just connectivity in a device. Really need to educate and inform with trusted partners in, you know, in our community, that these, you know, families or individuals who need to be connected are open to be connected. You know, again, you know, it's an individual choice whether you're going to be connected or not.
Absolutely. Thank you. Roseanne, I'm not sure if we have any audience questions. I'm trying to monitor things as we go.
We don't have any audience questions, but what I'd actually think would be helpful from the panel, if all of you could actually tell us, as folks trying to bring our community together on so many different fronts, as well as all of our attendees, many elected leaders in our community, many people engaged on so many different levels. What piece of advice could you give to each of us to actually go forth and try to bring about what is necessary to make all this happen? Sorry to put you all on the spot, but I figure, you know what? Let's go big.
Well, I guess I'll start just to break the ice. Roseanne will tell you I always have something to say, right, Roseanne? You know, I think for me, having done this, like I mentioned earlier, for a number of different city and county organizations prior to this one, I really think it starts with the executive vision and support at the beginning. And so I was fortunate here in San Mateo County that, you know, I work for a board of supervisors and a county manager that recognized that early on, even before COVID. And so made my job relatively easy for me. You know, I sometimes think my primary role, and one that I welcome, is to be an educator and a communicator, and that bridge between the community and the needs of the community and the elected officials and the staff that deliver services. And so, you know, having that vision and the support from the people who make the policy decisions is critical. The technology, you know, is going to be varied no matter where you go. I know, you know, I saw one of the Q&As about 5G, and, you know, we talk about Comcast and satellite and Starlink. All those are great questions and relevant technologies that in specific cases could solve the problem. But given the diversity of terrain and economics in our state, let alone the country, I don't think any single technology is going to be the solution to all the problems. And so having a supportive executive team that allows the community to come together and advocates for ignoring sort of those traditional walls of, well, that's a city, it's their problem, let them figure it out. We're the county, we only do the unincorporated areas. Oh, it's a school district problem, they'll figure it out. The business owners should have figured that into their business plan. The nursing homes should provide that to the elderly. I think we have to come together as a community and understand that it's a basic need. There's going to be different solutions for different areas. But I think if you have that unified vision and mission of coming together and making things better for the community and setting aside time and staff and funding for that and being open to partnerships and different ideas, then I think we can make progress. And I think our county is a great example. I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress, not because of necessarily what I did alone, but really because of the partnership and that supporting environment we have in the county to get things done and be innovative and be forward looking. So to me, that's the key, and what I would suggest any other county or city or school district that's trying to solve this problem.
Thank you, John. That's a great suggestion. And I want to call out the leadership of Mike Callaghy, along with the Board of Supervisors, and the leadership of our Superintendent of Schools, Nancy McGee, who I know is listening in. I mean, honestly, they haven't looked at any borders. They haven't looked at any cities. They just said, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get it done. So I'm going to turn to Assemblymember Rivas, LLOYD, LORENA, if you could give one piece of advice.
Well, I'll start. I mean, I'm something that Lloyd mentioned earlier, you know, had me thinking, you know, if the FCC and, you know, the new administration work towards making this a utility, you know, I want this in the future to be talked about as of, you know, like right now, we don't talk about, oh, should we put electricity in the school or in a home, or should there be running water, right, in a home? That's not even a discussion that we have, right? You know, it's like, of course, it's a basic need. And so I hope that this is what access to the internet becomes, and that the federal government is thinking of it that way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. LLOYD, LORENA?
Lorena, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's and Lloyd mentioned this, it's great to have finally the focus on the need for access, because it was prior to the pandemic that we've been working on this and making sure, and it's important to continue the focus on it. But I also think the most important thing is in partnership, because no two geographic areas, no two districts are the same. And that's one thing that we've been doing, is working and partnering with each of our different communities to address their specific needs, and making sure that we're connecting more people.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to stop my video because mine's really glitchy, and hopefully that'll improve the audio. It won't stop. There it goes. Okay, so hopefully this will improve my audio a little bit. I seem to have trouble on my end. I'm going to say two things. One, or three things. One, John, I agree with you 100%. Leadership is the key. But then what are you leading people towards? And so I think, wherever we are, we need to establish an overarching goal. And for me, that's connectivity to the home. I had in Sacramento, we tried something in the spring, Wi-Fi buses that were parked around the school district, around the city, multifaceted partnerships. And I toured some of those buses, and the technological capabilities were fantastic. But in all of my tours, random tours at random times of day and random locations, I never saw one person using them. And when I talked to the people who were there, they told me nobody ever used them either. So it was a solution that didn't work. And you have to think about how people operate. And yes, people will, when they need to, go to McDonald's or go to Starbucks when the libraries are closed. We've all seen the pictures. But is that the appropriate solution? No. So I think policymakers need to focus on how are we going to get this to the home? Because if you don't, then the people who do have it to the home are going to have an advantage. My kids, we have gigabit internet service at home. We have 4 people and 6 laptops, not counting the iPads. Why doesn't everybody do that? Ha, ha, ha. But the kids who have to go to McDonald's are going to be at a disadvantage when competing with my kids, and that shouldn't be the case. So you need to figure out how are we going to lift the bottom up. That's one. The other thing I want to give as a tip to all of the people in local government out here, or even state government. Something Lorena said about people not being aware of the benefits. One way to overcome that is if they hear about the benefits repeatedly from trusted messengers. So how does that work? Well, you walk into your hospital and the nurse or the doctor says, okay, and you can follow up online and treat it as if it's a prescription, making sure, diplomatically, just making sure you have broadband at home. And then if you don't, refer them to Comcast Internet Essentials, refer them to the appropriate place. If they're hearing that message from multiple providers, from the electric company, from the hospital, from different points of government, oh, by the way, you can follow up online and it's much easier, then they start to understand what the benefits are, and you can use that as a way to refer them to access that's lower, more affordable access. So I would think that would be something that everybody can implement today while we wait for the FCC to act, is just try and work out a multi-party approach to referring people to existing programs.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I want to thank the panel, because your panel actually was a perfect segue from Superintendent Thurman and his senior policy advisor, Mary Nicely. And some of the themes that came out of this were really vision, support, flexibility, trusted messengers, allowing the community to come together, partnership, a willingness to actually have the tough conversations. I love the term lift from the bottom up. And connectivity to home. Again, the community and our technology will be varied. We always talk about, well, let's get it perfect. Well, the old saying, don't let perfect get in the way of good. Let's try to do what we all can. And I want to, again, thank our panel. There's going to be 2 questions that will go out to all the attendees in an email. What's your key takeaway from today? And what topics would you like to see in Connect 2021? I'm going to turn it over to Assemblymember Berman to close us out today. Thank you so much for being here. Mark, can you take it away?
I can. Thank you, Roseanne, and thank you as well to the panelists for your wise words, your advice. Necessity is the mother of invention, and COVID has caused us to do things much differently than we had in the past. And it's also accelerated some changes. And I think it's really important that we identify what worked, what didn't. Lloyd talked about some things that didn't. Jon talked about some things that did, and a lot of other folks have as well. And so let's figure out how we can really kind of internalize those changes and then scale them out more broadly than they are right now. And it's an awful situation, but it's also an opportunity to improve the way that we operate and as a society, and it's definitely shown a light on the digital divide that exists and exactly how impactful that is in exacerbating the haves and the have-nots in our communities. So shame on us if we don't learn from this experience and do better to make sure that everybody has access to the internet, which, as every panelist said, is absolutely essential to our everyday lives. On behalf of Kevin, Warren, and Roseanne, we want to recognize a few people before we close out. First, SAMCETA, the San Mateo County Economic Development Association, and Roseanne Faust. We're proud to have Roseanne as a partner, and Roseanne and Larissa Ocañata are always instrumental with lots of behind-the-scenes support, and even more so this time around because of the COVID kind of impact that it's had on this event. The Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber of Commerce for the use of the Chamber Studio. I'm very impressed by what you've done with the place. And incorporating Connect20 as part of the Progress Seminar. And thank you as well, Rocky Robinson of Penn TV and your staff for all of your help today and leading up to today. And finally, a big thank you to Marcy Dragan with Supervisor Warren Slocum's office, Mario Rendon with Assemblymember Kevin Mullen's office, and of course, my own Zach Ross with my office. Thank you to all of you for all the work that you did leading up to today. And we look forward to continuing the conversation, and we'll see you next year at Connect21. Thanks so much, everybody.